All right, everyone, welcome. This is another of our KWS Research Forums, and this is a special KWS Research Forum because we're going to be joined with, or we are joined by Jonathon Mitchell and Chris Olivere of WMC here in the Memphis area. And we're going to be talking about their backgrounds in broadcasting, but we're also going to be talking about an exciting opportunity that we are collaborating with Dr. Robby Byrd from the School of Journalism and Strategic Communication and WMC on a really, really exciting opportunity. And so real quick, I wanted to go around and give everybody their short introduction. And so we'll start with Jonathon. If you could give us a brief 30, 45-second introduction, and we'll go around the room from there.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. My name is Jonathon Mitchell. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of WMC here in Memphis. I've been here for about 4 years. I came from the NBC owned and operated television station in San Francisco, where I was actually the Vice President of News. So I actually come from a journalism background, which is a little different than most general managers who often come out of sales or finance. So I have a long-time journalism background, long-time production background, and actually started in the business while I was in college on the production side of things. So that's how I got my foot in the door in the business.
And thank you for that. Chris, you're up next.
Sure. My name is Chris Olivier. I am the executive producer of the University of Memphis / WMC / ESPN Plus sports venture. Jonathon, who is not only a close personal friend, but a colleague for a decade in San Francisco while he was the VP of News for the owned and operated affiliate. I was the news director for the 2 regional sports networks under the NBC Sports Group banner. In those days, it was called Comcast Sportsnet Bay Area and Comcast Sportsnet California. And that's where Jonathon and I collaborated on several World Series victories and parades, NBA titles and parades, as well as a lot of first other ventures that became the template for what the O&Os and the RSNs in the same markets eventually adopted. And Jonathon recruited me and convinced me to come to Memphis really just earlier this year. I came aboard in February, and we've been we're in the embryonic and launch stages of this new sports venture between the parties that I mentioned. So very excited about what we've already done and looking forward to the future and this collaboration.
All right. And thank you, Chris. And I apologize. I believe my pronunciation, I gave you an extra syllable on your last name.
No worries.
And next we have Dr. Byrd from Strategic Communication and Journalism.
Yeah, I'm Robbie Byrd. I'm an associate professor of multimedia journalism over in the Department of Journalism and Strategic Media. Before going into academia, I was a newspaper, sports reporter, sports editor, did quite a bit. And now I teach, off and on, I teach the multimedia sports journalism classes over in the Department of Journalism. So.
And then I am Dr. Havard. I'm a professor in the sport commerce unit within the Kemmons Wilson School. And I do have a little bit of a background in this area. I used to work in the public information office of the University Interscholastic League for about 2 years. And then Robbie and I have collaborated on a few things over the years. Our students have worked together on podcast projects. And so when we were presented with this opportunity and this collaboration, it was really, really interesting. So to get things started, before we talk about the program itself, I wanted to have Jonathon and Chris tell everybody a little bit about their background and advice for people wanting to follow their same path. So if Jonathon, you could go first and give us a little bit of how you got to where you are and advice for people who would like to follow that.
Yeah, absolutely. So much like a lot of folks when they're starting their education, I changed my major while I was in school. Actually, I didn't change my major. I completed my first degree. I thought I was going to be an eye doctor. So I actually have a degree in biology, which a lot of people think is funny since I work in the TV business. But when I was in college, I was always a news junkie and wanted to be a journalist actually when I was growing up. And but you know, kind of a career counselor, I think when I was in high school, convinced me that I needed to be a doctor or a lawyer. And at the time, I thought I was just going to be playing in the NBA, so it didn't really matter what I was studying, as you know, I was playing college basketball. Obviously, none of you have ever heard of me or have my basketball card, so you know I didn't make it to the NBA. And once I graduated, I'd been working at a local television station for about 2 years. My college roommate convinced me to get a job at the TV station because he didn't have a car and I did, so I could drive him to work. So I could drive us both to work and started working in production and just absolutely fell in love with it. It was a passion of mine. I was not passionate about studying medicine. I was passionate about journalism and broadcasting. And it just, once it got in my blood, it couldn't get out. And after I graduated, I waited about 2 years, saved up some money, went back to school, paid for it myself to get my my journalism degree. So I got my my journalism degree at the same university I had got my biology degree from, which was in Oregon, and continued working at the television station that whole time, and really crossed over from the technical and production side of the business to more of the editorial side. I had a news director who was the person that's in charge of a newsroom in a local television station basically come to me and said, look, you have a lot of potential to be a producer and a news manager. I'd like to, you know, sort of grow your career. And so he became a great mentor of mine. And I moved up into the position of assistant news director, which is basically second in command of the newsroom. And I was in a small market at the time, and small markets sort of have a ceiling. So I tell people television, broadcast television is a lot like Major League Baseball. You have major leagues and you have the minor leagues. And then within the minor leagues, you have a lot of different divisions. So you have single A and double A and triple A. So to put it in perspective, you know, if you've been to a Memphis Redbirds game, you know, that's a triple A baseball. It's just a step below the major leagues. Well, when I was working in my first job, I was in single A baseball. So it was a pretty small market, which means you don't make a lot of money. There's not a lot of opportunities. So I had to move on. And that's one thing to know about the television business. It's often very challenging to work in the same market for a long time, unless you're lucky enough to start in a market maybe the size of Memphis. This is a place where you can settle down. But most of us in the business start in small markets and we work our way up. So I moved on from my first market in Oregon to Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was in the same role as the assistant news director of a much larger television station. And from there, I moved within the company that I was working for to Toledo, Ohio, to get my first executive role where I was in charge of the newsroom myself. So I became a news director myself. And I was running a newsroom in Toledo, Ohio in Market 70, which is basically AAA baseball again. And from there, I moved back to the West Coast where I was a news director for an NBC station and 3 Fox affiliates. And while there, I was lucky enough to be on a team that built and programmed a regional sports network. So we actually built a local regional sports network, and it was built on the foundation of Gonzaga University sports. So we had Gonzaga basketball, we had all of their sports, and then we expanded into some, at the time, Pac-10 sports before it was the Pac-12. And then we also had a lot of Big Sky sports, which would be sort of the equivalent of like the Sun Belt around here, if you're familiar with Sun Belt sports. And then we did a lot of minor league sports. So we did arena football, we did Canadian juniors hockey because we were far enough north that we were part of the Canadian Juniors Hockey League. And so that was a really, really great experience, and things were going very well. And I was very happy there. But then I got a call from the NBC network and they said, hey, we'd like you to come be the vice president of news for our station in San Francisco, which at the time was one of the largest, still is one of the largest newsrooms in the country for a local television station. So it was a tremendous opportunity. It was one I couldn't pass up. And I grew up just about 5 hours north of San Francisco. So it was a place I was very familiar with, had a lot of friends in, and was looking forward to moving to. And I spent about 7 years there, and, you know, was sort of really at the top of the game. I couldn't really go any further as a news person. If I went to New York or LA, it was the same job, just in a different city. And I wanted to move on and run the entire organization and be in charge of the P&L, the profit and loss. So it's very difficult in the NBC world to move up into that role because it's so limited. We only had 10 stations, eventually 11 stations in that group. And more often than not, people in my position that wanted to move on and take over their own station and move into a P&L, you know, management position usually has to leave the ONO groups because they're very small. And so I had the ability to come to Memphis, to the company that I once worked for when I worked in Cincinnati and Toledo. It was the same company, so I was familiar with them, and they were familiar with me, and they reached out and called and said, will you come here and run WMC? And I was thrilled. That's a tremendous opportunity for your first general manager's role to operate in a city of this size. It was a real blessing, and I jumped on it and moved my family out here 4 years ago. So that was my path, and it's an unusual path. I will be honest with you. Most people that are in my seat come up in the sales, out of the sales side or the finance side, and they sort of work their way up. And most news people kind of always stay on the editorial side of the business. They started maybe as a producer and then become an executive producer, an assistant news director. I started on the technology side. So I was a director, and I was a technical director, a graphics operator, an audio guy, eventually an editor, so I was doing all that kind of stuff. And then I crossed over. So I had a very unusual sort of zigzag path. If you're familiar with San Francisco, I took Lombard Street all the way up to the top. I was kind of going all over the place, the crookedest street in America. So my path is unusual. We'll probably talk to you in a minute about a more traditional path and sort of how you can maybe make your way into this crazy broadcasting industry.
All right, and thank you, Jonathan. And actually, I did my doctoral work at Northern Colorado, so I am very familiar with Big Sky and everything up there. So,
excellent. Yeah. Greeley.
Yep. Lived in Greeley for 3 years. It was very, very nice living up in Colorado. Chris, can you give us your background?
I certainly can. Like Jonathan, unlike Jonathan, I should say, the one area that differs in our trajectories and our careers is that sports television was really the only thing I ever wanted to do, probably from the time I was old enough to make that decision. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. My high school had its own television station, which was amazing for that time. And when I was applying to that high school and I saw the TV station, I said, this is where I need to be. And so for me, there was really no other choice. If I had been a biology major like my good friend and boss, Jonathon Mitchell, I would be digging ditches right now. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I certainly would not have managed to get through college as a biology major. But I went to the University of Delaware, and my path has been, at least in the 20th century, I'm dating myself, very similar to what folks from my era, you needed to do to move up. And I was cognizant of that early. I won't go into every stop along the way because they include Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. and Orlando, Florida and New York and Denver, Colorado. When you were talking, Cody, about Denver, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and eventually to Memphis. So the unique thing about my own career is that it certainly wasn't something that I charted in that sense, but I've been a part of 7 launches in my career, both regionally and nationally. As an example, I produced the first live show in Golf Channel history when we launched in 1995. I was producer for a show called Golf Talk Live, and was honored that our first guest was Arnold Palmer, who was the chairman of Golf Channel. So that's one of those career memories that you never ever forget. I've also been a part of the Fox Sports Net launch in Los Angeles after I left Golf Channel in 1996. I worked for Fox News and I worked for Fox Sports at the same time. I was somewhat of a hybrid. I was also part of the first ever college conference, the Mountain West Conference Network, which predated the Big Ten launch by a year. I was recruited there as a consultant by a mentor and very dear friend of mine who, like Jonathan, was a big part of my luck in terms of my rise in this industry. Who recruited me to come to Denver as a consultant and loved the team there so much, I eventually accepted the news director position before I went to San Francisco and launched at the time, the 2 biggest RSNs in the country. What was unique about San Francisco was that, unlike New York and Chicago and other markets where you had multi-teams in the same sport, you had various RSNs from different networks that might own one or two of those properties. Well, Comcast owned all of the properties. So whether it was the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's, or the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors, we owned all of those properties. So we had two regional sports networks that fell under my purview in terms of studio production. We did more than 600 sporting events a year and over 1,500 studio shows. And proud to say, and not certainly not because of me, because my job was to set course and create the culture. But as a group, during that time, we won more Emmys, or regional Emmys, than any other RSN group in the country, which was quite a tribute to the caliber of professionals that that we hired, and that I took a lot of pride in growing people, because to me that's a big part of the legacy, is recognizing talent. And that's one of the things dovetailing into this conversation that both Jonathan and I take a lot of pride in, because it's not just about this ESPN Plus project, which is very similar to a launch. It really is a brand new product, and it is really in a lot of ways a new sports hybrid channel in this new digital world that is now mainstream. But we have an opportunity to help University of Memphis students, the real future of this business as it's evolving and changing, to really have God knows, I wish we had, I was lucky enough to be part of something like this when I was an undergrad, which we didn't have at that point. But what's going to be unique about this is students are going to have an opportunity to really work hands-on on a product that is network caliber, and to have that opportunity to not just have the classroom part of it, but the actual hands-on, and I mean literally hands-on, working in a control room in the various positions, or working remotely with our remote crew to observe and run camera, or whatever they may want to do. It will give students and the future professionals a real hands-on understanding of how live TV works, on a level that, even though this is market 50, obviously ESPN, everyone knows that brand. It's a national caliber product, and the expectations from a production standpoint are on us to deliver what you see on the linear mother channel that is ESPN and ESPN2. So that's very exciting, because it's not going to be a product that is something that would be in market 150. It's the production requirements and our level of, both Jonathan and I have incredibly high standards for what is put on the air, and students are going to get a real feel for what is required. And I think that obviously undergrad and matriculation and all of the classes that the university provides are invaluable. This is just a much more granular, hands-on feel for what they'll hopefully be doing in the future. And it's really like an internship on steroids. I mean, not to use that terminology, but it really is a living classroom, as I've said to students that we're already using from some of the other schools in the region as we get this thing built. So I am very excited. I'm proud of what we've done in this first year, and there's so much more to come. So that encapsulates my my own journey. So really looking forward to working with all of you on this.
Okay, and thanks. And let's go ahead and kind of segue from that, and let's get right into what the program is, what the collaboration is, where it started, because it deals with the new AAC media rights and what the university is required to do under those media rights. So if Jonathan, we could start with you if either of you want to jump in, and Dr. Byrd jump in as well if you have any questions or comments, and talk about what this program is and what this collaboration is, and then we can get into the more kind of details of it.
Sure.
So this was essentially, the genesis of this project came from really a breakfast meeting between myself and Dr. Red a little more than 2 years ago. And this was during the time when the American Athletic Conference and ESPN were in negotiations to put together a program that would effectively provide content for the ESPN Plus product. So ESPN Plus is what we call over-the-top product, an OTT product, much like Netflix and Hulu and Tubi and Pluto. Those are all what we call OTT platforms. And ESPN, seeing where the future of broadcast lies, is starting to develop a new distribution platform, which is ESPN Plus. And the idea behind this was, giving also an opportunity to showcase sports that aren't often showcased on traditional broadcast television. So something that we often call Olympic sports, they just sort of fall under that moniker. And those are sports like, baseball and softball and volleyball, men's and women's soccer. These are sports that, unfortunately, you often don't see until maybe it's a championship game on an ESPN or a CBS Sports or one of the major big four networks. You only, those sports you only get to see in a championship. And those are great. There's a great venue to showcase our student athletes. And so that was really the idea behind ESPN Plus, is to create all this unique content that people do want to see, but isn't, unfortunately, sometimes you can't monetize it the same way that you can football and basketball on the broadcast channels, but there's still an opportunity to monetize it and really showcase what the schools have to offer. So essentially, Dr. Rudd had faced the same headwind that every president of an American Athletic Conference school faced, which is, how do we do this? How do we produce all these games? And it's a pretty robust production. These are produced the same way that any ESPN linear game is produced. As far as the graphics go, the expectations go, it looks no different than what you're going to see on ESPN. And it has to, because at any time we might get picked up on ESPN or ESPN2 or ESPNU or even ESPN News. So that they have to look identical to what you would see on linear, because we could get picked up at any time into that position. So he came to me because Dr. Rudd and I had met a couple times previously, and we had a nice lunch one day where we just wanted to get to know each other, and he wanted to learn about my background, and he knew I had a background in building a regional sports network. And he also knew I had a pretty big background in San Francisco with a lot of major sports, working with the NBC sports team and, my own content team that we had. And he basically said, can you help? And I came back to WMC, I got my staff together, and at first they looked at me like I had an arm growing out of my forehead when I said, how do you guys feel about producing games for ESPN? Because no local television station in America is doing that. And so we knew we were going to try and do something that was cutting edge and really out of the box. And we developed some technology with some of our technology partners that we use on the news side of things to do these games in a very low cost and efficient manner from a technology standpoint, so that the university wouldn't have to invest millions and millions of dollars into building an entire control center and big 53-foot production trucks that have to be pulled by, a semi truck. And so we created this idea. We did a proof of concept. It worked very well. And then the other idea I had around this is, the staffing to staff a sports production can be very, very expensive. And, that we had that thought in mind. And the other thought that I've had in the back of my mind for quite some time is our business has become, it's changed a lot. It's hard for us to find and recruit talent. And, I always kind of think I like to fish where the fish are. And we've got this, great university, world-class university in our city that I've worked with before on projects when it came to, more on the news side. I'd say 40 to 50% of our staff has graduated from University of Memphis. So we have a large, we already have, very, so it's proven to me that there are very talented people coming out of that university that have the ability to work in our business. And so one of the ideas I had was, well, what if we could start to develop students through a project like this, that once they graduate, we now can start building our bench here at WMC, but not just here at our company. Because I told you I came from NBC, which only had 11 television stations. Well, I now work for Gray Media, which is the second largest broadcasting company in the country. And as of yesterday, we now have 117 television stations. It's a lot more than that 11 at NBC. So what does that mean for you? That means opportunity. And not only do we have 117 television stations, we have Raycom Sports, which we produce sports for the NFL, Major League Soccer. We produce all of the ACC sports. So we have this huge sports production facility also that's based in Charlotte and New York City. And so we have that. We also have a division called Tupelo Honey, which produces live events all around the world, produces television shows that you see on TV all the time. A lot of them actually air on ESPN. A lot of them are sports programs. And we're also building 100 and I believe 30-acre or 160-acre movie studio outside of Atlanta that's going to have 12 sound stages. We're going to be producing, we've already got agreements with Netflix to produce a lot of their new shows there. So we have a lot of opportunity, but we need people. That's the most important commodity that we need, that it's really getting harder and harder to find. So my idea was we could use this program here in Memphis as a beta to get this going. And then my goal is to spread this to some of our other television stations that also have, that are in the ACC footprint. We actually have 5 other stations in the AAC footprint, excuse me, that we can start developing that same program and continue to build talent for our company so that we can, have a really bright future. So that's sort of where this came from, and where we had the idea of how can we get students hands-on experience. And it's not completely altruistic. We're not just doing this for you. I'm doing this for me too, because I need people and our company needs people. So this is a way that we can really train you, because we all went to college. Going to college is great. I'm telling you, the best experience you're going to get is when you actually get in the business. That's when you're going to really start learning how to do all this stuff. You're going to get the foundation in school. But if we can teach people the foundation prior to them graduating, A, it's going to be great for us. B, it's going to be great for you, because your trajectory will be accelerated to that of your peers, because they might be coming out with theoretical ideas of how to do things, and you're going to be graduating with hands-on, and you're going to have on a resume that you may have already taken part in 50 productions for a national television organization, being ESPN. So that was the idea behind that.
And thank you for that kind of introduction of what the program is. If I could jump in with a question about what is the benefit, what do you see as the benefit of something like this, for something like the streaming content and the agreement and the media rights deal? What is the benefit to a university the size of the University of Memphis, to student athletes, especially those that are in those Olympic or non-revenue producing sports? And then, and obviously there are wrinkles that have been introduced with now NIL and transfer portals and everything like that. There's more access, more opportunities for student athletes. And then also, what are the opportunities for students at the University of Memphis from these type of television and media rights agreements?
Chris, I'll take the, how does it benefit the university? If you want to take the, kind of the positions that people can garner. So I'll take the first part and you take the second part. Does that work?
Sure. Absolutely.
To me, I see one of the big benefits. There's never, the first one is monetary. Because, frankly, as someone who was a student athlete myself, we know that football and men's basketball, for the majority of universities, fund all the other sports. That's just the reality. What this does is it now creates a new revenue stream for universities to help fund some of the other sports, especially Title IX sports, which I think is critical. Now we're getting funding for sports that don't normally get as much funding. There's a new revenue stream to help support those. So that's one thing. I think that's really critical, because this is a pretty lucrative deal for these universities, not just University of Memphis, but these universities across the board that have deals with ESPN. So this is a really critical new revenue stream for these sports that in the past have relied on football and men's basketball. I think the other thing that's really beneficial for the university is recruiting. It's great to be able to tell recruits on a sport outside of football or men's basketball that you're going to be on national television. And that means something to student athletes, especially if you're a student athlete that has aspirations to become a professional athlete, because, you know, just because you may not play football or men's basketball, you know, there are now professional leagues in other sports that are really starting to gain a lot of momentum. The WNBA is getting a lot of momentum. The National Women's Soccer League, I'm a huge fan of that. One of my, you know, kind of my other daughter, that, you know, my best friend's daughter, actually I grew up with this kid. She is one of the stars of the NWSL. I support them tremendously. To be able to tell players at University of Memphis, say on the women's soccer team, which is already getting a national reputation as being one of the powerhouses in the country, that not only are you going to get to play for a perennial top 25 team, you're going to be on television for the majority of your games. And that's going to get them exposure. It's going to get them exposure to NWSL scouts and even European scouts, because ESPN Plus can be seen overseas. And, you know, a lot of women's soccer players go over and they play overseas. So you have an opportunity for exposure. And I think that's going to be, you know, something that's really important to a lot of athletes. If you would have told me when I was playing ball that I was going to be on TV a lot of the time, that would mean a lot to me, because it's just more opportunity. So you have the opportunity for exposure to not just a local audience, not just a regional audience, but a national and even international audience to watch, that are going to be able to watch you play. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be very beneficial for sports that are outside of football and men's basketball. And just to give you an example, I mean, I think we are producing every single women's home game. Every single one of those is on television. We're working our way up right now to the other sports because we're sort of ramping up as we go in. But you know, we televised a lot of the women's soccer games, a lot of the men's soccer games. We even did the women's playoff game that was hosted here. So, you know, you're starting to see sports on television that just were not seen before, you know, outside of, you know, softball. The only time you saw women's softball was during the World Series. You know, even men's baseball, it's pretty hard to find outside of, you know, Omaha in the World Series. So I think that's going to be that's one of the big benefits. So it's monetary. It's the ability to showcase and expose athletes outside of just football and basketball. And as far as positions, I think Chris can talk about that.
No, absolutely. As Jonathon said, you know, the world now is all about content. And from a coach's standpoint, this is such an invaluable tool because, you know, they can honestly say that, hey, you come here and, you know, your games are going to be on television. And as Jonathon also said, because this was his brainchild, when the university and the AAC first approached him about it, from a positional standpoint, we are doing what is essentially, as I said, it's a clone of the ESPN product, maybe not with all the production bells and whistles, although we have a pretty good armament of those elements as well, because the packages are all the same and come from ESPN. But from a standpoint of students and what the potential and what we see it being is, you know, in a live event situation, you have multiple cameras that students will have the opportunity to physically be camera people. There is a control room where you have a producer and a director and a TD and an audio person and a replay person. They are going to get hands-on, real-world pressure in the moment exposure to that entire rush that comes from live events. And as I said, it's unlike even what basic internships would be, because as I said, I've used the term living classroom, and that really is what both of us see this being. As I said, I've been part of 7 launches in my career, and the one thing that I have gleaned from my various stops is, you know, what it takes to set a standard from the get-go. And as Jonathon also pointed out, Gray is a company that is really the trajectory is, you know, there is no ceiling for where it's going at this point. And regardless of what may be happening with conference realignment, ESPN needs this content. And as Jonathon also mentioned, we're not a non-for-profit. You know, there is a monetary component for everyone involved. there are many intangible benefits for all of that as well. But for ESPN, farming a lot of this out is going to save them tens of millions of dollars over the life of these contracts. But ESPN also needs the content because we now live in this streaming universe where the future is now is all about the digital realm. I mean, I don't have to go into all of the streaming apps that are out there. What is going to be interesting is what cable used to provide. The digital realm is now doing that. So the aggregation of how that is going to come together, I think is going to be fascinating. But whether it's a big tech company like Amazon or Netflix or Apple or the gamut, as I said, we all know who the players are involved in this. When I was at NFL Network these past couple of years before I joined Jonathon here, they have a partnership with Amazon, and we're talking about mega tech companies, and we all know what their valuations are and what their global reach is, and they are the future. They are the players that are now involved with the NFL, and they're all trying to get their various tentacles in content, because at the end of the day, content is king. And the one message I would really want to impart to University of Memphis students is that anything in a career, it's about preparation, but it's also about opportunity and luck. And students today are right at that intersection because they're at a world-class university that is part of a major conference that is only going to be expanding in the future, regardless of the membership of schools involved, and how that may shift. The point is, it's only going to evolve and grow. And as Jonathon also mentioned, we're in the nascent stages of this ramp up. This year I think we're doing, and Jonathon can correct me, I think the overall number of games that we will produce by the end of the spring semester is somewhere north of 60, maybe 65. The pandemic shortened year of this past spring, we had overlaps of seasons. So we were doing fall sports, winter sports, and spring sports as all at the same time. And it was crazy, but it worked well. And then in this next year of the contract, we are required to produce, really, I think it's north of 100 games as it'll turn out.
North of 100 games.
So, right. So the opportunity is massive for students. As Jonathon also mentioned, he has this vision that not only on the sports side of things, but Gray with all of its properties, he wants this to be, and as do I, but it was his vision that this will provide a pipeline for the Gray family of stations and networks well into the future. And if I'm a student and I'm hearing that hey, I may have a direct pathway to a position right after I graduate. God knows I wish we had that when I graduated from college way back 200 years ago in 1986. So so that part is immensely exciting because at the end of the day, students are where they are, and they're learning all of the things that they're learning so that they can have a job in the future and grow their own careers. And this provides the engine that will allow them to do that. And I know from our standpoint, we're very excited about what we see, where this can go if it evolves exactly the way we want it to.
But I think something else that's interesting too is you've got when you're in the classroom, you're doing a lot of theory, right? You're sitting in a lecture, you're learning from people who've been there and they've done that. You're going through the narrative of what it takes to become, whether it's a journalist or a sports manager or whatever, right? So you get the theory part of it, and you get a little bit of hands-on, and I think the difference here too is once you get out of the classroom and you get, like Chris said, the living classroom, you're paired up with somebody who's going to be training you, who may have been doing this for 30 years, right? And has worked on some of the biggest productions in the country. I mean, Chris said, he and I both have worked on multiple World Series, the Super Bowl, the NBA championship, Stanley Cup. I mean, he's done a ton of major golf stuff. We've worked on just about every major sporting event, and the people that are working for us have done a lot as well. I mean, our main producer worked for 14 years doing ESPN games for University of Western Kentucky for the Hilltoppers. So, she has 14 years of experience of doing games, and we have a team of folks that have been doing this. I think if you look at just the people who are the core people that are doing the training and the teaching on our end, I mean, you're probably looking at, I hate to say it, but 150 years of experience. I mean, it is a lot. I mean, I know I've been doing this almost 30 years. Chris has been doing it longer than I have. A lot of our engineers that will be working hands-on with folks have been doing it for even longer than that. We're talking 40 plus years. So the people that have a wealth of experience are going to be sitting with the students, really training them. So it's not like we're going to throw you out there and say, go do a game. There's a lot of training that's going to be involved before they're ever allowed. And they're really never going to be allowed to do something by themselves. There's always going to be somebody there to watch and help and troubleshoot. So it's really like, I love the term living classroom. It's going to be in a classroom with professors that are really doing a lot of one-on-one with you for each of those positions.
Real quick, just kind of in that same kind of vein. So I will probably field a lot of questions from the journalism students about, I want to be on camera. I want to be the voice. I want to be the reporter at the game, right? And for me, a lot of times it's the part of the behind the scenes, the production part that they don't know exists really. So maybe if you guys could speak to that a little bit, to that student who says, I want to be on camera, I want to be the reporter, I want to be the announcer, whatever. Speak to how this experience can still be beneficial to them, even if it's not their dream right now.
It gets your foot in the door. It gets your foot in the door, and you get to see what is actually going on, because trust me, what you think you see on television is not what's happening behind the scenes. So these are national television productions. So the people that we have calling the games are national TV hosts. So we've got people that have done, these are professional play-by-play, professional color analysts. And so for a student, you get to see what goes on, how you put this together, what the preparation is like, how these folks get to do what they do. And it's not to say that we can't put a student with somebody to have them shadow the play-by-play, the color, the sideline. But if you can actually get in and see how it works, you're going to get an understanding of what skills you're going to need to develop to get into that position, right? And you actually will have that hands-on experience that says, I've worked on a national television production, and I know what it takes to do that. And you get to learn all those positions, and trust me, you'll have a much better understanding of what on-air folks go through by doing everything behind the scenes first. I think that's something that's very critical, so that, when you do eventually become an on-air person, you're going to know what people are going through.
Right.
And I think that's going to be pretty critical. So I just think it's the opportunity to get on a production and learn to see what it's all about. And I will tell you one thing, a lot of us go in wanting to do one job. And then when we get the job, we go, this job's a lot more fun and it's a lot better. You might find that you might like working behind the scenes a lot better than in front of the camera.
Thank you. And that's exactly what I would tell them. I just want you to tell them that.
We are in Memphis, Tennessee, inside FedEx Forum.
From the Larry Finch Center on the campus of the University of Memphis.
The senior from Alberta on the mark in the 84th minute. The Tigers take a 2.
Oh, baby!
Just let me be quiet.
Duran, we're going to see an awful lot of that this season.
That one off the fingertips in Memphis. Gets a big point from Adam Hamilton.
Against the 11th ranked Tigers. Leading the ball game. Bates reverse, pretty off the window for Amani.
With Westford out, it's popped in. The tying goal.
Here's a play at the plate. And she's out. What a throw. Gets the bunt down third base side. His only play at first.
Yeah, so if you guys could just describe the job, right? What would they be expected to do? What would a typical game look like for them? What kind of positions would they be able to do? And would they rotate? Just kind of describe to us and for the students what they would be doing in a typical game.
Sure. First of all, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So we expect the same level of commitment, or more, maybe even more of a commitment that you're doing with your classes. We hope you're going to all your classes, but I was a college student. I don't think I made it to every one of my classes, but the expectation is, if you're going to be part of this program, we're going to expect you to be there. So the goal is, I do want to rotate people around. So I don't want them to just be stuck in one position. I want them to learn as much as they possibly can. So the idea right now is to get folks in some of the associate positions, associate director, associate producer, the camera ops, so they can start learning how a camera functions. There's a lot more than just, it's not your iPhone. These cameras are pretty complex. There's a lot you have to learn about how these cameras work and operate. So you're going to learn how the cameras operate and how they work. And then eventually I'd like to get, once students become a little more advanced and familiar with the workings of the program, to start transitioning some of the students, especially the ones that excel, into some of the control room positions where they can start learning to do instant replay. They can learn to do audio. They can learn to do graphics. That's something that's going to be very critical, but that's going to be more advanced stage. So if at the beginning you're taking, let's say a 100 level class, that might be some of the associate positions, some of the shadowing positions. Then you get up to a 200 level class, you're working on cameras. And then we start talking 300 and 400 level classes, you're getting into the control room and you're starting to learn some of those positions as well. Does that sound about right, Chris?
Yes, absolutely. You nailed the macro level version of what we want this program to be.
It's been an eternity since Chris and I were in college. They still do 100 level, 200 level, 300 level.
We're thousands, but yeah, same thing.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the time commitment for students, what you're kind of envisioning for maybe average work week?
So I think what we do, depending on the number of games per week, because we can't hammer the kids because there's only so much practicum that you can get. So, and depending on how big the class is, I would think if let's say we have a week where there's 2 games in a week, you might take half the class would work on one game and the other half class would work on the other. Typically, depending on how robust the production is, determines how much time you have to be on the show. So, typically a basketball game, especially one that's at FedEx Forum, is pretty complex. So we get there a little bit earlier, and that could be a 5-hour commitment, 6-hour commitment that night. Where a women's basketball game, because the way we've set up Elmer Rowan Fieldhouse is much easier for us to set up, that commitment might only be 4 hours. It just depends on the sport. So per game, it could be anywhere from 4 to 6.5 hours, depending on the complexity of the sport. Does that sound right, Chris?
Yes, it does. As Jonathan mentioned, there is so much more that goes into game day and actually preparation. We do production calls with our talent well in advance of each game, because there are myriad issues to discuss. And the least and the most important, though, of which are, we set up calls with the coaches because as they prepare, both the producer and the talent, they will talk to both coaches. They will go to game day preps as part of their research. Our game days themselves, on a bigger stage, as Jonathan said, we've made it more economically feasible and more economically squeezed in terms of what you would find on the network level. But game days themselves usually involve 4 to 5 hours of setup, both remotely and in the control room, because there is a lot of pre-production work that is done prior to any live event, any studio show for that matter. It's not just plug and play and people show up at 30 minutes out. The homework and the production preparation is days, weeks, and in some cases months in advance. So that part of learning just how involving it is and the type of commitment that it takes, it will be an eye opener for a lot of students. And as we've discussed, there may be those students who thought this is what they want to do and decide it's not for them, which is great, because that also is invaluable in terms of knowing ahead of time that this may not be for a certain individual. But there are also those students who get in the crucible of that pressure, and like Jonathan and I, there aren't too many adrenaline rushes that you're going to find in most careers that come with being part of an event. It's hard to describe. It is a feeling that stays with you, and you do become addicted to it. And it is the students who become addicted to it in a very good way, wholesome way, that it will become part of their DNA because they'll be hooked on it. And so from a dual path perspective, it will be an eye opener. And I think, just having that experience and being able to say, hey, this is so for me, and I can't imagine doing anything else, or hey, this is great and it will help me in another discipline, but it's not what I thought it would be. That's a big part of what this will be for students as well.
And I think the time commitment could be a little squishy too, because it depends on the position that we're assigning them to for that, say that week or that couple weeks. Because if they're assigned to maybe be the associate producer, a good experience for them would be to sit in on those calls and those meetings with the coaches and the talent. And so that might be a little bit different than just a game day, right? So we might have a group that's working just on game day. And so they're going to be, spending this many hours on one day, where we might have a group that's assigned to the producers. And, that might be an hour call, one day during the week, and an hour call, another day during the week, and sitting in on the talent meeting to really get them to understand what all is involved in the production of a game. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize, especially at the highest level, when you do a game, let's say you're doing a Monday Night Football game for the NFL. Well, your team flies in Thursday, Chris? That's when the talent gets there, probably Thursday. And then you start doing production meetings, throughout those days, and you have these production meetings last 4 hours.
Yeah, and as you know, absolutely. And they take, they're preparing weeks in advance. I mean, what Sunday Night Football, which I would say, with all due respect to our partners at ESPN, NBC throws, they just throw more things at that game, and they're preparing weeks out from each individual game because of what is required in order to pull off a production of that magnitude.
Well, and I know that Sunday Night Football, they would come into town on Wednesday. And I know this for a fact because their stylist was also my stylist that styled our TV station. And so whenever there was a Sunday Night Football game, she would make a stop in at the station, and she would get there on Wednesday because that's when everybody arrived. We don't have stylists at ESPN Plus.
And I want all the students to understand also that this is this exciting opportunity and this collaboration, just as ESPN Plus and the programs on ESPN Plus are ramping up. This collaboration is ramping up as well. So for students over on the sport management or hospitality management side who are interested, we definitely will have more information on that we could talk to. Same thing from journalism and strategic communication. And we also will have more information for students in the coming months on collaborations between the two schools at the university and how you can work and get experience with that. I wanted to ask Jonathon and Chris an important question about because of where we are in, I don't know if it would be called a new stage of the pandemic, post vaccinations. It seems like we're maybe in a different phase than originally. But as far as health precautions, what steps do the students have to take in order to work on projects?
That's a great question. We have a corporate vaccination mandate. So in order to work at Gray, you have to be vaccinated. Also, in order to enter our building, even if you're a guest, you have to show proof of vaccination. That's a corporate mandate across all of our different divisions. So that also goes for the people that work on the ESPN Plus production. So if you want to be a part of these productions, you're going to have to show proof of vaccination. We already have a few students working with us, and it has not been an issue for them to show us their proof of vaccination. They just show me or Chris their vaccination card. I send that to corporate HR, and they're allowed to then work on our productions. But that is, for right now, for the foreseeable future, you have to be vaccinated. We do not have a mandate for boosters yet. So it's only just the two, if it's either 2 Moderna or Pfizer shots, or one J&J shot and a vaccination card that you can show me.
And then as far as either game day or preparing for these, when they are in studio or they're around working with others, do you have a mask policy for people working behind the scenes?
Yep. So we follow whatever the county mandate is. So right now, since the county has lifted its mandatory indoor mask mandate, we are not requiring that inside of our building to wear a mask. However, if you're more comfortable wearing a mask, we encourage you to do so. There are still people in our building that wear masks just because it makes them feel more comfortable. Now, if you're working a sporting event, those can be a little bit different. It depends on whatever the NCAA, or for instance, if we work with the NBA, rules are. So if we're within 15 feet of players, we often have to wear a mask. So we make sure that everyone has a mask when they're at a site, just so that we're following any rule that is in effect at that point.
Yeah, thank you for that very important information. And as I said, we are ramping up this program in a very, very unique time. So it's calls for unique standards and everything.
It's been a challenge, and it's been evolving as it's gone, because there was a time where it was we did have mask mandates, so everyone in the control room was wearing a mask, everyone in the field was wearing a mask. There were certain situations where we're not ever going to put anybody in any sort of danger. So there were times where we had to change how we produced a game. We had to move our cameras because I felt it was too close to the crowd or it was too close to the team. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that everybody on our team or any student is as safe as they possibly can be. And we're going to continue that for the foreseeable future. We don't see anything changing. Even if, say, for example, a change happens at the university, just because there's one rule at the university that may be a little more lax than here, you still have to follow our rules when you work on our productions.
Yeah. And again, thank you for that. And at this time, Dr. Byrd, do you have anything else, any other questions you ask, or anything that you think is important for students to know about this opportunity?
I mean, I don't really have any other questions. I think you guys have done a great job of explaining exactly what's going on. I do, for students and our department, I'm excited about this opportunity for them, because so many of them have like a one-dimensional view of what broadcast is and what their future might be. So I think this is exciting for them. I also think that so many of them, I think they're gonna like really thrive in this kind of a situation. So I'm excited about it. And so I'm hoping that if you're watching this, that you're excited about applying for the position, and that you do so several semesters and not just one time, right? So yeah, I mean, that's really it. And we do have practicum credit that you can use. You can come see me if you have questions about how to do that, and how to make this count for you. We can count it multiple semesters. So we can work through that.
Thank you.
That's really all I have.
Thank you. And it's the same over on the sport side, sport and hospitality side, that we do have courses in place right now that can accommodate these type of opportunities. And then Dr. Byrd and I are also working on a future collaboration or future program to allow students to kind of take classes from both schools and both disciplines as well. And so I'm really, really excited about this. I hope people watching this, I hope you all are excited about this. This is a great opportunity. When we talk about opportunities for students and for all of you to get out and get great experience, this is one of those very, very good, very, very high quality opportunities that you're going to learn a lot from. And so I think we are all very, very excited about this collaboration. At this time, we'll wrap up. I wanted to give Jonathon and Chris the opportunity to say any kind of last minute or parting words for students. And also, if you could give a little bit of advice for maybe some of those aspiring students who are wanting to get into broadcasting?
Sure. One of the things that I tell everybody is, especially at a university like Memphis, you're lucky that this is a good sized television market. It's when it's on the bigger side. You have an opportunity with not only WMC, but there are 3 other television stations here. There's a great newspaper. There's the Daily Memphian as well, which it's also turning into a really great publication. There's a lot of opportunity for you to go out and get your foot in the door, get your feet wet. But it's really going to be up to you, because they're not going to come to you. You've got to go out and you've got to make connections and you've got to network. That's something that's really critical. Now you might say, well, I don't have a lot of experience yet. That's okay. We know that. We know that you might come in as an intern, or you might come in, maybe right after you graduate and take an entry-level position. But get your foot in the door. That's something that's critical. Go out and make connections. Ask for an informational interview. Make sure you have a LinkedIn profile, even if you don't have a lot of information yet to put on there. Go ahead and build one. And then once you get in there, the most critical thing I tell everybody is say yes. That's how I got where I got. I just said yes all the time. When people said, you want to try this? Do you want to learn this? Yes, I do. Learn as much as you can. That's critical, because the more well-rounded you are in your career, the more opportunities are going to open for you. You're going to have a lot more opportunity than somebody who is just, has one specialty or is only good at one thing. The more things you can be good at, and there are so many different opportunities in this industry. And there's a lot of different departments. You may not, you might get into the industry and decide, you know what, I want to go the management route, or I want to go the finance side, or I want to get into sales because that's where all the money is. Those guys, you can tell who all the salespeople are in the parking lot. They're the ones with the Mercedes and BMWs. So there's a lot that you can do in here, but get in, get your feet wet, and say yes. So, that, you can get more of those opportunities. That's the advice I usually give to folks. And we're looking forward to working with you. I mean, I think this is going to be, a fun project, but at the same time, we expect commitment. We're professionals, and we expect you to be a professional. Just because you're young doesn't mean that you can't be a professional and get in this workforce. I started my first job at a television station when I was 19 years old. And I worked my little butt off while I was there, and I said yes all the time. And that's how I became the youngest vice president at NBC, because I had such a leap on my peers because I started so much younger. So you might be able to have that same opportunity. If you can start as a freshman or a sophomore, you're going to accelerate your career, and you're going to have an advantage over your peers that may be coming out of Syracuse, or maybe coming out of Washington State, or maybe coming out of Arizona State, some of the traditional big broadcast schools. They still don't have the hands-on opportunity that you're going to be afforded by working on an ESPN project.
Yeah, I could not have said it any better, so I will not attempt to. As Jonathon said, just understand that it is a commitment. There are nights and weekends, because that's the sporting calendar. So students have to understand that coming in. And as I said, it will be an eye-opener in every possible way, and through, no pun intended, every possible lens that they look at it through. And it could open up some amazing doors, or it could open some alternate doors for others. As Jonathon also said, there is no such thing as a silly question. Come in asking questions. That's the only way that you learn, is to ask questions. A student may think, well, that's a stupid question, and I'm going to come across as someone that doesn't know what I'm doing. Not the case at all. The only way you can glean is to ask if it's not being provided. And we have a damn good team here of people that have not forgotten what it's like to be at that entry point in your career, and they are very dedicated to teaching. In fact, as Jonathon was saying, our live events producer, she has a background in teaching on the collegiate level. So there are a lot of advantages to doing this. But understand that it is a commitment. Ask questions, and it will be a great opportunity to network. That's what this industry is all about. Is talent is one thing, but it really does come down to who do I know, because they can open a lot of pathways for you. That's the reason that I'm here, because Jonathon and I, yes, we are friends, and I'd be the first to say that. But if we did not, network together and build that over the course of a decade and more, neither of us would be sitting here having this discussion with a couple of illustrious professors at the university, and that I can't impart that enough. So that's that really is key.
Well, and thank you, Jonathon. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dr. Byrd, for joining in on this. As I said, we're really excited about this opportunity, and so we're looking forward to seeing what this brings. And so that will conclude the research forum. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and thank you everybody for participating.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.